Hiya everyone. Welcome to day 5. We're still going, although Megan is in slight shock that I'm actually going to try and read this story. I skimmed through it earlier. Oh my goodness me, it is disgusting. Right, here we go. Dr. Dread and the Chair of 1,000 Farts. I will try not to laugh. This is a horror story. Do you dare listen on? No? Then switch off till tomorrow. Yes, you've been warned, and don't blame me if you have nightmares. Dr. Dread was the most horrifying teacher who ever stalked the earth. He was half man and half monster. The science teacher revelled in his own horrifying appearance. He loved the fact that all the kids at Grunge Hill were terrified of him. The man smirked to himself as they darted out of his way. Dr. Dread's face was permanently scrunched up like an angry walnut, holding a monocle in place. It looked as if he had just one beady eye, like a cyclops. He had long ginger sideburns or mutton chops creeping all the way down to his chin. Ginger hair exploded from his nose and ears like wildfire. His teeth were long and pointed like fangs. His nose was a wonderland for warts. He always wore the same white laboratory coat, except this white laboratory coat had not been white for centuries, as he'd never ever washed it. It was so thick with grime and grease it was actually a deep shade of brown. There were so many stains on it that if you dipped it in boiling water you could have made soup. Dr. Dread had sandals on his feet so he could show off his terrifying toes. They were a sight that would give you a fright with their long claw-like nails, open sores and rancid foot cheese. When Dr. Dread marked your homework, it would be returned with all sorts of nasties stuck to it. Snot, drool, dandruff, nasal hair, fingernail grot, foot cheese, earwax, pus, a wart, a bit of broken tooth, and something purple that, despite being sent to the laboratory for tests, no one knew what it was. So far, so monstrous. But I haven't even told you the most horrifying thing about Dr. Dread yet. His bottom burps. Poof. He blew off all the time. His trumps were so frequent, they might as well have been continuous. Poof. There was less time when Dr. Dread wasn't passing wind than when he was. The slightest movement was enough to make the teacher release his poisonous gas. Sitting down, getting up, bending over, straightening up, coughing, sneezing, throwing, catching, scratching an itch, breathing, blinking, thinking. Dr. Dread's parps were so strong that they were actually visible. A trail of bubbles followed him around the school. His chair in the science room was known as the Chair of 1,000 Farts. Since Dread sat there for hours at a time, releasing cubic metre after cubic metre of bottom gas, the chair was highly toxic. Once, as a dare, a girl put her nose right up against the seat of the chair. Immediately she passed out and slumped to the floor, thud. When she couldn't be revived, an ambulance was called. The girl was rushed to hospital, where she was kept in an isolation ward for a week. Months later, the girl returned to school, but she was never the same again. During lessons, she just sat at the back of the class, staring forward, silently rocking, a look of unspeakable horror in her eyes. So, if one of the pupils in Dr. Dread's science class did anything wrong, he had the perfect punishment. He would make them sit in his chair of 1,000 farts. No, the child would cry, not the chair of 1,000 farts, anything but that. Dr. Dread would grin, baring his fangs. Yes, boy, come here, he would say, beckoning as he rose up out of his chair, of course leaving one last brown bubble behind. Pfft. The child would then be led to the chair and ordered to sit. Reluctantly, they would. The entire class would look on at Dread's poor victim, feeling the bottom burp slowly engulf them. Ah! They would scream as Dr. Dread let out an evil cackle. Wah-ha-ha! Right, who else dares to talk in my science lesson? There would be silence. One day, A boy arrived at Grunge Hill who would become the teacher's greatest foe. A boy so gruesome he made Dr. Dread look like a beautiful princess. You might think that would be impossible, but you'd be wrong. That is because you've not met Bog. Bog was a boy who looked like he'd risen from a swamp rather than being born. No one knew if Bog was his real name or not, but it was certainly apt. Like a bog, he was damp and muddy. He had worms in his pocket, twigs and leaves in his hair, and moss growing out of his ears. When the boy walked, there was a sound of squelching. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Not only was he gruesome to look at, but Bog was bad too. Immediately he became known as the baddest boy in school. Bog never ever did his homework. His excuse, "I ate it," which was true. When the teacher became angry, Bog would snort with laughter. He swiped all the loo rolls from every toilet in the school. Then he wrapped the history teacher, Mr. Obsolete, in it while he was snoozing so he looked like an Egyptian mummy. Next he pinched books from the library and tore out all the pages to wipe his bottom, even though he never normally even wiped his bottom. He put the wiggliest, waggliest worms inside the girls' shoes when they were outside playing netball. When they slipped their feet back in them, they were horrified. He let the air out of all the footballs and replaced it with his own bottom burp, so every time someone kicked a ball, a stink came out. He snotted on the floor just outside the boys' toilet until he created a big pool. Then he hid behind the lockers and watched as boy after boy slipped over on their bottoms. He started a snowball fight with mashed potato in the dining hall. Bog made sure every kid got hit with a mash ball right in the face. He nicked a pot of purple paint from the art room. He then painted his bottom purple and covered the walls in bum prints. He dropped a slippery, slappery, sluppery slug down the back of the head boy's shirt. He tricked some younger kids into swallowing live tadpoles by telling them they were yummy chocolate balls. Ugh! I want my mummy! However, Bog would save his absolute worst behaviour for his science lesson. He knew he'd met his match in Dr. Dread and was hell-bent on getting the better of him. If the boy was warned not to spill the bubbling liquid he was holding as it would burn through the worktop, he would pour it straight onto it. Sizzle. If Bog was ordered not to stick the iron filings to his face to create a comedy beard, he would do it anyway. Ta-da! If Bog was told never to mix two acids together as they would cause an explosion, the boy would do just that. Kaboom! "Bog," Dread barked one afternoon, spraying the entire class with his spittle, "you are in deep, deep doo-doo." "What have I done now, sir?" replied Bog with a smirk. "Stuck this piece of paper to my back." Dr. Dread turned round. On his lab coat was a sign that read, "Beware, toxic gas." All the rest of the children in the classroom sniggered nervously. "Quiet!" boomed the teacher, and there was quiet. Dread continued, "Bog, I have the perfect punishment for you. One that is guaranteed to reduce even the naughtiest of children to floods of tears. Bog, I command you, you must come and sit in my chair of 1,000 farts. Wah-ha-ha!" As the teacher rose from his chair, all eyes in the science room turned to the back of the class. To the surprise of all the kids, Bog had a big fat grin on his face. "Gladly, sir," the boy replied brightly. With that, he hopped off his stool and skipped to the front. Before Dread could order the boy to sit, he had already bounced down onto the chair. Squelch! Sighed Bog. His nostrils flared to savour the scent like a cartoon child sniffing gravy in a television commercial. "What a delicious aroma!" Dr. Dread looked lost. "But boy, this is the dreaded chair of 1,000 farts," he thundered. Bog's expression turned to one of quiet concentration. Then a trumpet sound came from his bottom. "Make that 1,001, sir." "Silence!" thundered Dread. This only made the children in the class laugh a little more. "I said silence!" It was too late. Dread had lost control of his classroom. "Get back to your place at once! At once!" he bellowed. The boy jumped up and with a spring in his step bounced back to his stool. The teacher slumped back down into his chair of 1001 farts, defeated. As if that wasn't bad enough, Dread began choking. Ugh! He seized his neck with his hand and retched. "Bog!" That stink bomb Bog had left behind was absolutely lethal. It was far worse than his own bottom bubbles. In comparison, they smelled like the sweetest perfume. The bell rang for the end of the lesson as a still choking Dr. Dread slid down onto the floor. Lying there in a pool of his own spittle, the once feared teacher was determined to do something, anything, to get revenge. So that night, when he returned home to his basement flat on the outskirts of town, the teacher limped straight down to his top secret laboratory deep underground. There, by candlelight, he began devising a host of new punishments, each one far deadlier than the chair of 1001 farts. Dread made mechanical drawings on a chalkboard and began collecting all the ingredients he needed. Putting the end of a bendy straw into his ear, he sucked out all the yellowy wax. Next, he rolled it into balls. Then, he placed the straw into his nostrils so he could extract every last drop of snot. Dread collected gallons of it, filling 3 old bath tins to the brim. The teacher worked through the night. By dawn, he'd finally finished and was ready to unleash these punishments on Bog. "Wah-ha-ha!" he cackled. Dread was determined to teach this blasted boy a lesson once and for all. The bell rang for the first lesson of the day, and for Bog it was science. Dread smirked as the boy squelched his way into the classroom. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Little did he know what was coming to him. However, Bog had a plan of his own. Under his desk at the back of the class, he began secretly mixing together some of the gloopiest chemicals in a pot. The boy wanted to make the stickiest, gunkiest gunk so he could glue his teacher to his own chair. He would be stuck to the chair of 1001 farts forever. Little did he know what was coming to him. With his beady eye, Dread spotted that his nemesis was up to no good. Perfect. Now he would begin unleashing his torrent of evil punishments on the boy. "Not paying attention again, Bog?" demanded Dread from the front of the class. "What, sir?" replied Bog, as he tried to hide what he was doing. He didn't want to spoil the surprise. "Exactly," muttered the teacher, a ghoulish grin spreading across his face. "Come here." He beckoned with his long, thin finger. Immediately the boy hid the pot of gunk in his blazer pocket and squelched his way to the front of the class. Squelch, squelch, squelch. All the other children stopped what they were doing and stared. What was the world's worst teacher going to do to the world's worst child? "Here, boy," said the teacher, holding up a paper bag. "Because you've not been listening again, you must eat one of these jellies from my bag of doom. Wah-ha-ha!" Bog peered down into the bag at a collection of sad-looking, soft and shiny sweets. "Bag of doom? What are they made of?" said the boy suspiciously. "Try one and tell me." Bog shrugged and rummaged in the bag before popping one in his mouth. "They taste a little sour," he remarked. "That's because, Bog," began Dread, "they are made up of my own earwax." "Ah!" All the kids in the class were repulsed. Not Bog. The boy rummaged in the bag and popped another in his mouth. "Scrumptious!" Then he helped himself to a handful that he stuffed into his trouser pocket. "I'll have those later as a snack." The teacher thumped his desk in frustration. Thud! Still, Dread had plenty more punishments planned. "No matter, boy," he growled. "Go and stand in the corner." Bog did as he was told. "I do hope it doesn't snow," announced the teacher. "Snow? Inside, sir?" "Yes, inside, as you come face to face with the bucket of..." The bucket of misfortune! Wah-ha-ha! The man pulled a cord on the wall which emptied a rusty old bucket concealed overhead. A blizzard swirled down from above. In no time, the boy was completely covered from head to toe in flecks of white. He looked like the abominable snowman. "I love snow, sir," exclaimed Bog. He stuck out his tongue to sample some. "Doesn't taste like snow, though." "That is because it is made from my own dandruff." "Yuck!" went all the kids in the class. "Oh, good. I needed some spare dandruff. I'd all but run out." With that, Bog began picking up handfuls of the stuff and pouring it all over his head and shoulders. "Fantastic! Thank you, sir." The teacher stamped his foot in frustration. Stomp, stomp, stomp. "If the bag of doom and the bucket of misfortune have not brought you to your knees, then this certainly will. This is the hose of horror. Wah-ha-ha!" With that, Dread lifted up a hose that was connected to a huge cylinder concealed behind his desk. The teacher turned the nozzle and shot a torrent of slime straight at Bog. Splat! In seconds, the boy was covered from head to toe in a greeny, browny, yellowy sludge. It was mainly snot, but goodness knows what else the bad doctor had added to the mix. All the kids screamed and leapt from their desks in disgust. Ah! The slime was soaking them too, and what's more, it stank. "Thank you, sir," called out Bog, enjoying this opportunity to become even filthier. "I haven't had a shower in a long, long time." Bog began rubbing under his arms as if he were washing. "I imagine never!" exclaimed the teacher. "Actually, I'm going to make it a bath for you now." Dread spun the nozzle and the gunge splurged out at an alarming rate. Splurt! As all the other pupils rushed to the door to escape, the gunge was filling up the science room. "Get out! Help! I think we need to call Ofsted." Now Dread and his archenemy Bog were the only ones left inside. Both were up to their waists in gunge. "Oh, I nearly forgot," began Bog with a grin on his face. "I have some special shampoo with me, sir. Why don't you try it?" With that, he reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out the pot of sticky, stucky, gluey glue. Dread smelled a rat. This was a trap. "That doesn't look like shampoo. Give it to me, boy." The teacher went to snatch it, but there was a struggle. "It's mine, sir." "I said give it to me." Their heads clunked together. Clunk. And the glue ended up splashing all over both of them. Splosh. "Oh, no!" exclaimed Bog, trying to waggle his head. "What?" "I think we're stuck together." Their heads had clonked together, but now they wouldn't unclonk. "It's not shampoo, sir." "I guessed that." "It's the world's most super-duper-whooper glue." "I highly doubt an ignoramus like you would be capable of inventing such a thing," declared Dread. Using all his might, the teacher tried to free himself. Ah! But it was no use. The bell rang for the end of the lesson. "Bog!" barked the teacher. "Yes, sir," replied the boy. "Stay behind." "I don't think I have much choice, do I, sir?" "Oh, no." Indeed he didn't. "Globule of earwax?" asked Bog, rummaging in his pocket for the bag of doom. "Don't mind if I do." The two sucked on the yellow sweets. The glue was so strong that the pair were now stuck to each other forever. So whenever one of them was trying to eat lunch in the dinner hall, play football in the playground, dig for worms, conduct a dangerous experiment, go to detention, drag a younger boy through a hedge, play the back of a pantomime horse in the Christmas show, write a chemical formula on the board, run for the bus, or, of course, release a bubble bomb, they had to do it together. So Dr. Dread and Bog, the world's worst teacher and the world's worst child, ended up with exactly what they deserved: each other. That was quite disgusting, and I am quite surprised I managed to get through that without laughing my head off. Right, Thank you to Mr. Walliams for that. Please keep your messages coming in. I haven't checked them today, but I'm looking forward to doing that tonight. And I will say hello to you all again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe.